Hello. So this is a bit of a weird one for me. I'm in an RM about even clicking the button to record. Yeah. Uh, I guess as much as I feel comfortable, it's just a strange one to sometimes, I don't know, pick up the pen and write. To just start. Um, and weirdly enough, it actually ties in with what I wanted to talk about. Um, uh, I am a I'm a fully qualified social worker, but I started working with homeless people when I was 18, and that's where I learned everything. That's where I became who I am. That was that was where I worked when I was going through college and uni, and even afterwards. So it taught me all of my biggest lessons, and I think because the age groups were, between the ages of 18, and I think we had an 84-year-old at one point, so it had such a big age range. I think that's where I connect to the most, as to where I became my professional self. That's where I learnt most of my values in terms of talking and helping and supporting. Um, Obviously, I became a social worker after that, and I worked with kids, and I loved that job. And since then, I've been holding therapy calls for many people online and doing like mental health mentoring. And I guess to a certain extent, that makes me feel like I'm able to do this for whatever reason. That's how it works. That's identity. Um, I I've been talking to enough people now that I just felt like talking to myself. I guess um, I find I find it a strange transition that I've taken within my job, my career. Really, before I went from working with predominantly people who felt hopeless, who didn't have much identity. And I worked with homeless people who, you know, they've hit rock bottom. A lot of them have lived amongst the rock bottom for quite some time, and it's a difficult place to stay. It's a difficult place to build up from. A lot of them have come out of a long-term relationship, and now they live at the hostel. A lot of them, were in and amongst crime and gangs and stuff like that, and were recently released from prison or something similar. A lot of them are very much uh, addicted to alcohol and drugs, or drugs, and have been so for many years. And a lot of them, their patterns were bouncing between hostels to hostels. So in a way, my job was very simple. It was give love, give nurture, give understanding, give time, try and come up with some little strategies for those people, to have space, to have trust, which was very hard to sort of inspire for those individuals. They have had their backs against the walls since as long as they can remember. Um, and so that's why I felt so comfortable in my social work job. I mean, that was the families, that was the parents that I worked with, that they very much reminded me of those people I worked with at the hostel. Um, Now I am predominantly working with people who are in their 30s, who work, who have partners or have just broken up from partners, and they are not hopeless. Um, it isn't simply nurture and love that they need. Whilst they do need that, and whilst that's a great help, I mean that's what care and support is. You know, it's a way of harnessing love in a professional way. You know, to soothe people, to make them feel better, to distract them, to get them through that, you know, this day and the next day, and until whatever pain they've had, whatever situation they're fleeing or healing from, gets easier. You know, someone comes out of a marriage and they are now homeless, or they were released from prison. You know, you give them nurture, you help them get back to feeling better. They get some motivation. They start to believe in themselves. They come out the other side. That's just how it goes. Um, but what's difficult, I feel, is I've got a lot of clients who, you know, they have many aspects of identity. Um, you know, a lot of identity you get from your job. Oftentimes, you know, I've got somebody who describe themselves as being a big fish in a small pond, um, and I, you know, their identity and a lot of their self belief and a lot of what motivates them is their job. You know, that's for some people that is how they identify themselves, and that was the same for me. I was, you know, I was a support worker. I was a social worker. So when I left that job, I I felt very broken. I felt very confused. I felt a bit angry, you know, because whoa, you know, this was my journey. Hang on, I'm supposed to be a social worker. I'm supposed to be this, that, and the other. I'm supposed to give. That was what I told myself for, you know, for probably 12, 13 years straight. You know, that hang on, this is what I'm supposed to do. Um, So when I lost that, I was in a bit of a bad place. I just didn't know, you know, what do I do with myself? You know, who am I? And then if I'm not that, then who am I? And then you have to build yourself back up, you know, slowly but surely. Um, a lot of people, they identify with being a partner. That's, you know, that's their identity, or a mother. You know, I'm a mother. I'm a good wife. That's who I am. So a lot of people have different identities, and it's, you know, attached to their pillars in their life. A lot of people's pillars are very simple. It can be, you know, like job, family, friends. A lot of people that you see that go to the gym all the time, you know, their pillar is gym, you know, work out, and a lot of them, you know, it's their pillars are themselves. A lot of independent individuals are, you know, my pillar, I am myself, I will protect myself, and their standards are generally very high, right? And you know, I've throughout my time, you know, doing these jobs, which, as I said, were part of my identity. I not only did I learn a lot about myself, but a lot of my beliefs and values changed and altered along the way. I didn't necessarily get burnt out towards the world or anything like that. It was more my understanding changed. And, you know, one thing I wanted to talk about was mental health. Now, when you say the term mental health, I feel, especially today, and how it's always been, it's like a question mark almost. Well, what even is mental health? Your brain is unhealthy, but why? How can it happen? you know we know that it shows up in certain ways, and that's what you call depression. I'm mentally unwell, so I'm really sad. I feel lost, I feel unmotivated, I feel numb, um and anxiety, and that's uh fear to the environment. It's fear to situations. It's fear to uncomfortable and unknown. Um, and it can be debilitating. It can affect you physically. And everybody knows these sort of symptoms, but there's no real guide on it. There's no real textbook to understanding and getting past it. And more importantly, there's no real help to identify and change the route, because oftentimes people are very clever. A lot of the clients I work with are very clever. They go, look, I had childhood traumas, I had other traumas, I had abusive relationships, and PTSD, and I've always suffered with anxiety. But that's often that's it. That it's almost like their identity is somebody who suffers, somebody who's always suffered. Ever since I was 10, 11, 12, 13. I've had this, I've had that, and therefore I'm someone who has mental health issues. I think we all know somebody who suffers with their mental health, who goes through phases and stages. Some everybody knows somebody who's up and down, and they struggle. And we are very accepting as people, as humans. We want everybody to thrive and do well, feel safe, feel cared for. Um, but it's very difficult, and one thing I don't see often is people don't associate mental health with self-identity, and I think that is the biggest factor in all of mental health. Because it's one thing to have a negative experience, or a traumatic experience. That is in itself its own independent pain. It is like a nucleus inside a cell. It's like a powerhouse. It's like a trigger. It's where everything stems from. But I think the solution to most mental health issues, I think, is how you see yourself, how you treat yourself. If we treat ourselves well, and if we see ourselves well, we do well. But it's hard. We are just a zoomed out extension of our childlike selves. We don't grow up and become somebody different. We are kids, and then we grow older, and it's simple as that. And we go through life, we experience things, and it shapes us. And oftentimes it can shape us very negatively. The people around us, everybody does their best, but it's really hard to figure out how to get past some of these difficult and chaotic situations we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in times where we feel no love at all, and we then stop loving ourselves. You go through a breakup. Why does it hurt? Well, it hurts because not only have we have lost somebody who was a big part of us. It's like, it is grief. It's like a death. That person's now gone. You can't access them in the same way that you once could, and all those memories become sour, right? And that's what's so difficult. But I think why it hurts so much, especially like straight away, is, well, it's a reflection of ourselves. You don't want to be with me. Well, why? Why wouldn't you want to be with me? What's so wrong about me? Is it the way I look? Do I have a bad smile? Can I be really nasty and I didn't know it? Am I not who I thought I was? And suddenly, we are diving down every dark cavern, searching for clues, trying to find answers. And I think that's the part that destroys a lot of us. It destroys a lot of our identity. It's the hardest part to pick yourself back up from. Nobody likes being told they're not enough. And a breakup is that, isn't it? It's, you are not enough. Life is hard, obviously. How do we break the patterns? Because our patterns become our comfort zones. They become our home. That's why we repeat them. It's sometimes it's all we know. Sometimes we simply feel comfort in sadness, in anger. If you've grown up in a home that was full of tears, that was full of shouting and screaming, it becomes the norm. It becomes what we remember. And as I said, we were just kids that got older. How do we break those patterns? And I truly believe that is one of the most difficult questions to properly solve. I think, we can answer it. If we have a pattern of being nasty to ourselves, right, we have to change the way we think. So how do we change the way we think? We have to recognize when we are being nasty to ourselves. And it's probably good to make a diary of when we're being nasty to ourselves. We have to identify. And so it's good to understand what you're identifying. So, maybe you figure out that, okay, when I'm not playing games or doom scrolling or watching shows over and over and over, when I'm not with my friends or working or this, that, and the other, and I'm finally alone and it's late at night, that's when I get real nasty. I really hate myself. Then you can identify that. You can identify, oh, hang on, I have a lot of coping mechanisms which are to distract, to bring dopamine, You know, you watch a comedy show over and over and over. You watch The Office over and over and over, or Friends. You know, it's your comfort, it's your nostalgia. You watch, you scroll Instagram and TikToks. You know, for sad videos and funny videos. You know, anything to just give you momentary joy and laughter, and you know, to release dopamine. You know, you can identify that, and really, you know, you can identify, well, if I'm nasty to myself in the only time I take for myself, I'm nasty, and then, well, I don't like myself right now. I don't love myself right now. My value is low. You know, I don't see myself as worthwhile. I don't want to be alone. Then you know, it's your duty to notice the thoughts as much as you can and to talk to yourself. You know, you are a person and you deserve to understand yourself. So you talk to yourself and you figure out, well, what is it I am saying? What do I not like? You know, do I hate the way I look? Do I hate the way I stand? Do I hate the way I interact with new people? Am I really awkward and cringy? You know, like, how do you identify yourself to yourself? How do you see yourself? Um, am I incredibly emotional? Do I get extremely angry? You know, have I had bad experiences with that person and that made me think that this person was going to be the exact same? You know, what patterns do we have? And recognize them. That is the first step. And it's hard. I don't, I think it needs to be said more that changing the way we see ourselves and recognizing patterns is extremely difficult. But we all have a duty to do it so we can be the best versions of ourselves. You know, you recognize the negative, and then we have to dilute it by being positive. You know, you can get as much artificial love as possible, as much external feelings of care and support and nurture in dark times as we want, but it only really matters about how we see ourselves. It doesn't matter how anyone else views us, it doesn't matter to us because it's not us. So it only matters about how you view yourself. And if you can help elevate yourself and help see yourself positively through, you know, a more prettier, a more brighter lens, then you are already going above and beyond what most people do. You know, most people, they get knocked down in life, either when they were young or maybe it repeated and when they got older. And eventually they start believing it. Someone calls them ugly, or someone calls them worthless, someone calls them annoying or goofy. I remember once a girl, not meaning to be horrible, called me goofy when I was at school, and I'd never even thought about it. Goofy, you know, and I couldn't not see it. Once it had been pointed out, that was it. I every time I looked in the mirror, I hated myself a little more. And on the back of that, I bugged my mum to get me braces. And at one of my appointments, the doctor or surgeon or whoever it was, whoever specialist it was, said, we can extend your jaw so you have a better bite, right? So that was what they would do. And to do that, they would have to saw my jaw into 4 different places, cut it up into 4 different places. And I was young and insecure, so I said yes. I did the braces for 2 years, and then I went into surgery and they cut my jaw up, put in a little bit of titanium, like the smallest amount you could imagine. It made 0 difference at all. And on the back of that, my jaw was wired shut for about 8 weeks. Whilst my jaw healed, my face was completely ballooned. And I couldn't eat properly. And that was one of the darkest times of my life. I regret it. Truthfully, I regret it. It was sad, it was just sad. I couldn't sing, couldn't talk. For many years afterwards, I struggled with eating. Not physically, but something about it, something changed in me. I struggled enough with eating when I was younger, but that was it. It all jump-started off one word, and that's how fragile we are. We do need to love ourselves more. If I would have loved myself more and been prouder of myself, if I wouldn't have been, as chronically ashamed of myself, then I wouldn't have made myself that vulnerable. I wouldn't have hurt myself so much. There's lots of things in life I very much resonate with, and it's hard. I wish I had an easy, simple solution for everybody. I understand why we don't always value ourselves, but truthfully, it's so stupid. It's so silly. It is so silly. We are 100% perfect, 100% valuable. We are who we are supposed to be, or we wouldn't be us, But it doesn't mean that the duty of changing and evolving falls on anyone else but ourselves. It is up to us. Nobody is going to make us feel as good as we make ourselves feel. And I think it's the most important skill to have. You are less vulnerable. You are less ashamed. You are more proud. You are more motivated to keep achieving. Everything elevates. If we could just sit down with our thoughts and be happy with ourselves. So that's the task. That's the task for us all. Sit down, have nothing, or at most have something like this background playing some nice low energy beats, music, something small, something, have nothing with words, have silence. See how long you can sit there and just be, and notice what thoughts show up Are they good? Are they bad? Do you truly love yourself? You know, it's weird because we are moving into a world of AI. I mean, look at the video in front. That is, that's the world we're moving to, and all my clients talk to ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever, and they get great advice, really good advice. But, we need a proper human voice, we need human interactions, we need nurture, and we need to feel value, and we get that through often love, and intimacy and comfortability. It's hard to shut me up once I get going, but I think I just wanted to talk. I've been talking to people, helping them with this specific therapy I give for quite a few months now. And, I will speak to my partner about it. But part of me wanted to speak openly and to make it accessible. I know that when I've suffered throughout my life, and I truly have suffered, and I've indulged the suffering, I've given up on myself, and I would have done anything to have someone like me be available to talk to me, to love me, to help recognize my strengths and my weaknesses, and to build me back up again, to help me find my identity. After one of my breakups, I just gave up. I don't know why even. I felt so burnt out from life. I was so exhausted after college and uni and in the breakup, and I just wanted some peace. I wanted to be alone. And I regret that time so much. The thing that I regret the most, because when you've ever had a dependent, you feel guilty, you feel shame very easily. And my sister is a lot younger than me, and she's my sister, but she's also like my best friend, and she's also like my child. And so when I isolated myself for those couple of years, I wasn't a very accessible or available brother. I wasn't as good as I used to be. Never nasty, but I wasn't who I should have been. And I have to identify that isn't my fault. It's not about faults or blame or this, that. I identify it. I understand why I was a broken-hearted kid who felt like they weren't getting anything out of life, and I was self-indulging my own suffering because that's where I felt comfortable. I felt comfortable in pity. I felt comfortable in sadness. And I did hurt myself throughout those periods. I delved heavily into smoking, And in a way that can be a form of self-harm. You know it's not good for you. You know it hurts. It switches you off. You know that it takes you away. And and I beat myself up about that for a long time. That was something that when I spoke about it always brought on tears and emotions. Anything to do with shame for me, that was where I really struggled. And you have to accept the first and primary source of pain. I had a breakup. I was exhausted. I had troubles at home. I had friendships become sour, and so you accept that. Okay, this happened. It's not my fault that I isolated myself. But and then there's the secondary source of pain, and that is how we treat ourselves. And that is what we do have control over. We do have a choice on how we treat ourselves in bad times, in dark periods. Well, are we going to show up? Are we going to take care of ourselves? Are we going to allow ourselves to even ask for help? We have to be honest. How bad does it get? Because it can get pretty bad inside our heads. So, are we just going to roll over? We get knocked down. We don't get up. We'll roll on our face and suffocate in the sand. And it can be comforting, and that's why it's a thing. Sad music is comforting in some ways. Sad films bring tears, and then the tears make us feel a bit refreshed. It makes us feel a bit like we've had a reset. And that's because it allows us to process our own memories, our own emotions. It allows us to chip away at the weight we hold. It's easy to talk. It's harder to do something about it. If we can make ourselves go to the gym, make ourselves go on walks, make ourselves reach out to friends, make ourselves go out and get drunk, then I believe that we can make ourselves sit down and do nothing, and to analyze and inspect our own thoughts. If you have some time and you're struggling with anything that I've said in how you view yourself, then please use some protected time and sit alone and figure out, well, how dark does it get? What do we not like? And then highlight how difficult, how easy it is to shed some light, to be positive, to talk about the good things we do. I even in this dark time, I'm still there for my best friends. I still pick up that chore. I am still good to everyone. I don't shout at anyone when I'm down. I don't get angry, because a lot of us, we roll one of two ways. We either go internal or we go external. Are we going to beat ourselves up? Are we going to get angry and blame it on someone else? We all have patterns, usually. That's how we cope as kids. We have these defense mechanisms, and they become patterns. They become our home. They become the place we turn to when things get really tough. And in your 20s and your 30s, more and more people are realizing things can get tough, and a lot of times it's the silly things, small things, the things we didn't realize were such big parts of our identity. Yeah. Please take time to show up for yourself, to be the best friend that you deserve. You know, if you had a friend that spoke to you the way that you could speak to yourself sometimes when it gets bad, would you let them through your door? Would you bother with them anymore? I don't think so. Life is tough. Give yourself grace. Give yourself love and time. And please speak to yourselves kindly. Yeah. Well, that's all I wanted to say. I will see you soon.